All right. So again, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's admissions panel with representatives from the arts and social sciences programs here at NYU. Before we get started, I wanted to quickly acknowledge that NYU is located in ancestral Lenape homelands, and it recognizes the long-standing significance of these lands for Lenape nations past and present. We are also conscious that New York City has the largest urban Native population in the United States. We believe that historical awareness of Indigenous exclusion and erasure is critically important and are committed to working to overcome their effects on our own educational institutions. Again, my name is Christy Mino. I work here in the Office of Graduate Marketing and Admissions Consulting, often known as Central Grad Admissions. I'm joined today by 4 admissions officers from different NYU graduate and professional schools who will be sharing their insights into the graduate school admissions process and provide some tips for making the most of your application. So I'll begin by asking them to each introduce themselves, share which office and school they're representing, and ask them to share something that's unique about NYU, that draws students to enroll. Sam, you are first on my screen, so I'm going to have you kick it off.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us and spending time with us today. My name is Sam Lewis. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the assistant director over at NYU Silver School of Social Work. I think that something that really attracts students to Silver is just a strong focus in clinical social work. I think unlike some other social work programs, our students don't necessarily have to choose a concentration or a track. And they're really provided with a strong foundation, whether their interest is in practice or policy or research or administration. I think, while there's opportunities to explore more specialized areas of practice, students really enjoy receiving that comprehensive and holistic knowledge of the profession. So, yeah, and nice to see y'all. I'm excited to hear from our colleagues as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam. Tom, you are next on my screen.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tom Kleinert. I'm the Associate Director of Graduate Admissions at the Steinhardt School, also known as the Steinhardt School of Culture, Education, and Human Development. I use he, him, his pronouns. Something I feel that's unique, well, not unique, but special about NYU are the academic support services we have for students, whether it's within our libraries or through our Moses Center for Student Accessibility, helping students that may have visual impairment, mobility issues, need reasonable accommodation for learning issues they might have. Also have our Wasserman Center for Career Development. I'm going to ramble a lot. You'll have academic advisors for whatever program you have. We have a lot of international students and have a phenomenal Office of Global Services that supports you with visa services and special programs. And I just think that these services that we have are unparalleled that you would find at other universities.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tom. I completely agree. And one fun fact or interesting thing about NYU is that half of the total student body population, so half of the roughly 50,000 students that are enrolled at NYU at any given time are graduate students, which I think is a little uncommon, or you don't always see that many graduate students. And so the resources sort of speak to the fact that there are a large number of grad students on campus. So thanks for highlighting those. Laura, you are next on my screen.
Hi, everybody. My name is Laura John. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the graduate admissions representative for Tish School of the Arts here at NYU. And I think something really exciting about Tish is that our faculty are all really involved in the industry in New York City. So I think that that's something really fun for our students, is that not only are you being taught and trained by really excellent faculty, but you're also making contacts and making connections with professionals who are actually active in what it is that they're teaching.
Definitely. Thank you, Laura. And then finally, Jamie.
Hi, thanks, Christy. It's nice to be here today. My name is Jamie Berth. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the Director of Enrollment Management at the Gallatin School of Individualized Study, where students come to design their own interdisciplinary programs of study. I think at Gallatin, we currently have about 120 graduate students enrolled in our program. And because we're individualized and interdisciplinary, I think one of the things that's so exciting about our school is just the huge diversity of projects that our students are undertaking at any particular moment that really energizes the entire community. We have a very student-centered approach, obviously, because we're individualized programs. So we have to focus on each individual student and helping them get the support that they need. And Tom did a good job at mentioning some of the kinds of institutional support, and Christy as well, that really exist for all of our graduate students. And in addition to that, at Gallatin, we have a very strong structure and system of advising in place, because to do an individualized program, it's very exciting. There's a lot of freedom, but it also requires a lot of help and support to do it in a rigorous manner. So I think that's one of the things that makes our program so special. And I just echo what Laura says. I think all of the schools at NYU are at the tremendous advantage of being located in New York City. So we all have access to communities that are really at the top of their game and at the top of their field. So I think being in New York City is a huge advantage for anyone who comes to NYU. Thanks.
Thanks all. I want to completely agree. I love being in New York, but for those reasons that a few of you mentioned, New York is a great place for grad school for a lot of reasons. And thank you all again for being here. I appreciate it. So we've got a number of prepared questions that we will start with, but again, I encourage you to put your questions in the Q&A. I'll keep my eye on those. And if there are ones that are relevant for the group, we'll be sure to try to get to those throughout today's session. My first question before we sort of dive into the actual act of applying is at the very beginning, thinking about, all right, I'm pretty sure I want to go to grad school, but what are the things that I should think about? How do I determine if I want this degree or what I need out of this degree? Who do you recommend speaking to when you're making that decision? I think the research part of it is really important at the beginning. Understanding your why can really inform the rest of your experience. So who would like to share a little bit about why graduate school, what things to think about? Who do you talk to be in that process?
I feel comfortable doing that. So there are many reasons why someone may be pursuing graduate school. Perhaps you're looking for a career change and you're needing additional knowledge about a field of study. You already have a bachelor's degree, so you don't want to go back and get another bachelor's degree. So you're applying for an academic program like at Steinhardt. It might be food studies, it might be nutrition, it might be related to your undergraduate studies. Then there are those that maybe you've been working in it, you're right out of undergraduate and feel, you know, I'm ready to go. I'm just ready to, I know I need a graduate degree for things like a teacher certification program. You go on directly for your master's under your bachelor's degree. I could go on and on, but perhaps the panel has.
Awesome, thanks, Tom. Anyone else want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I think this is Sam. I don't know if I'm on your screen, but I think that considering graduate school or just the process in general is a very personal and intimate process. So like you mentioned, even before speaking with other people, I think it's important to just reflect on yourself, your goals and aspirations, do that research on the industry that you're interested in. You know, like, is this degree required in order to obtain a job? Will a grad degree benefit you at the level of work that you see yourself doing? Or would a degree really enhance your ability to achieve those long-term goals? I think that's extremely important first and foremost, especially in this climate that we're in. And I think once you're at that stage where, you know, you want to get that outside insight, I'd always recommend speaking with an advisor, whether it be staff at the specific schools that you're interested in or someone personal to you who may have pursued graduate school before, even if not in your specific industry or profession. I also recommend seeking out a current student at those institutions. I think that there's a level of credibility that students have, and they can give a certain perspective about what it's like to be a student in those institutions that, you know, someone as a staff member and admin can't give you. So I'd always recommend reaching out to or seeking out current students at those schools. I think that, you know, students tend to be transparent. They provide valuable feedback about the school and give a good perspective of what it's like to be a student.
Definitely. And I think LinkedIn is a great resource for that. If you don't happen to know somebody, LinkedIn can be a really great resource for connecting with current students, but also with people who have a job title that looks really interesting. Reach out to them and say, this looks cool. Tell me more about it. Do I need a master's degree for it? Anyone else have anything to add?
I'll chime
Yes,
in.
Christy and Sam, I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
I
Tom.
did not give the second part of that. I also encourage, if you've never been to New York, if you have the possibility to come, take a graduate school tour, get to know, like, can you see yourself in the New York City environment? That's going to be really part of, your graduate study experience is New York City itself.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Tom, because the energy of New York City is very particular. And so getting a feel for it before you arrive is a great way to think about whether or not you want to commit to 2 years or however long your program might be. I would also say, as someone who I did my master's at NYU, and then I did my doctoral work at NYU as well. And I think Sam brings up a really good point. It's like you're having this conversation with people that you have relationships with, but mostly you're having this conversation with yourself. And I think the more people you can talk to, the better, but then always bringing that information back into yourself and really kind of asking yourself the toughest questions ultimately, because people's experience are never going to replicate exactly what you do in grad school. And so some people might have really positive experiences. Some people might have negative experiences. It doesn't mean that that's going to be your experience either way. So I think educating yourself with as many conversations as possible is really useful, but then always kind of like coming back to yourself is a really important tool for making these kinds of decisions.
Thanks, Jamie. I really agree with that. Laura, do you want to chime in on anything?
Sure. I think everyone's made really good points. I think I have pretty much the same thing to say, but I would also just say, if you're currently an undergrad student, or if you have recently graduated and you're still in touch with faculty, I would say that they're a really good resource as well. If you're considering grad school, just reach out to them, let them know what it is that you are hoping to do with your career, and ask them if they think that grad school is a good idea or a necessary idea. And then ask them, I know we're all here promoting NYU, but ask them about programs that they're familiar with, that they would recommend you look into based on, maybe not all of our programs have exactly what you're looking for. So asking a faculty member who knows you well and has worked with you through undergrad, what they would recommend, what programs they could see you at, is a really good resource to point you in the right direction.
Great, thank you all. That was really insightful and very helpful information. Jamie, do you have something else to add?
One more thing. I'm not sure about my colleagues, but we also do Gallatin specific information sessions. I'd be happy to drop the link in the chat. But that's another great way to really learn about the specific programs that you're interested in. And you can always feel free to reach out to any of us that are on this call, and also administrators and other programs that you're interested in.
Definitely, I think that's a great point. And the more information you can gather about the program that you're interested in, the better you'll be able to talk about why in your application. And so I want to shift gears a little bit to talk about that application process. So I'll start by asking you all to share your general admissions requirements. I know, typically speaking, I can share what usually an application will ask for. You'll be asked to submit your resume, a personal statement, letters of recommendation, sometimes test scores. And so broadly speaking, those are the materials that you'll need to submit. But if you all could share a little bit about the nuances about your application. So first, just logistics, and then following up, I'll ask about how people can start thinking about making their application stand out. But first, just sharing a little bit about general application requirements for those who are on the call interested in applying to your schools.
Nice, I can hop in. And I think this is for all of us, for graduate schools in general, students applying must have that bachelor's degree from an accredited college. At the point of application, you don't necessarily need the bachelor's degree to be conferred, but at the point of enrollment, matriculation, you'll have to have that bachelor's degree. That's the basic requirement for all graduate schools. And for Silver, at Silver, we review applications holistically, so we don't necessarily have a minimum GPA requirement. We also don't require the GRE. We do require some of those basic components that you mentioned, Christy. So we do have, the statement of purpose. We require transcripts, a resume, as well as 3 recommendation letters. Some of the other things that we, are considering when reviewing applications are a little bit more of those other factors that you kind of mentioned. So I'll hold offline on discussing how to make yourself best present yourself in an application. But yeah, those are our basic requirements.
I can chime in. So at NYU Steinhardt, the 2024 application is going to open in about 2 weeks. I saw a question in the chat regarding that. One thing that might be unique to the Office of Graduate Admissions at Steinhardt is that we're a resource to you, answering questions about student life, housing, financial aid, and obviously the application process. But we do not make the decisions on your application. These are all made by committees within the department where there are experts in the field that you want to study. They're the ones making the evaluation. We have the music department and the art department. I wouldn't be able to assess someone's musical ability on the violin or someone's artistic talent when it comes to painting. So there's that, but that's just something unique to Steinhardt. I gave you, yes, we're a resource, reach out to us. And again, we have information sessions as well for each of the specific programs that I'll put our link in there and I'll pass it back to the panel.
Yeah, I'll jump in. So for Tish, we also offer artistic programs. So it is similar to Steinhardt in that we've got all those general requirements. Everybody who applies is submitting unofficial transcripts, resume, statement of purpose. We want 2 recommendations. We will let you submit 3 if you have a really strong 3rd recommender, but only 2 are necessary. And then for every single person applying to Tish, there's an artistic component. So make sure to check out the website for the program that you're interested in, because for acting, that's an audition. For cinema studies, performance studies, that's going to be a writing sample. For film, that's a creative portfolio, but every program has a specific artistic component that you'll also complete.
Yeah, so at Gallatin, similarly, you have to have proof of having completed your BA. We require transcripts, 2 letters of recommendation. There's a statement of purpose. We do not require the GRE. We are part-time or full-time, so you can apply to be either at our school. We are fall-only application admission cycle. So while we can sometimes occasionally accommodate a spring start date for a part-time student, it's only in rare circumstances. For the most part, the sequence of our curriculum really works better with a fall start date. So those are things to keep in mind. And then as far as the specifics, I'll wait till round 2.
Great, thank you. I think it's helpful to get just the general sense so in the back of your mind, if you're at the beginning of your search process, what you need to be thinking about and preparing. I want to underscore one thing that Laura said about unofficial transcripts. So typically, most of the time you can apply with an unofficial transcript and then you will need to submit official transcript. But again, that will vary. So I think the thing to highlight and emphasize about NYU is what I'm sure you'll come to understand is that each school has its very own unique set of admissions policies. And so the most important thing, say this before I ask you all to weigh in, is to read closely what the requirements are. And if you are asked to submit a personal statement that's 200 words, don't submit one that's 300 words. I think your ability to follow the instructions and deadlines is part of your overall application process. And so with that, I'd like you all to speak a little bit about the things that you're looking for when you're reviewing an application. Are there certain things that stand out, either generally, or what sort of things do you like to see in a personal statement? Any advice that you have for someone who comes to you and says, look, I'm really interested in applying to your school. How should I really work and think about creating a strong application?
I'm happy to jump in on this one. Oh, sorry, Laura. I'll jump in and then pass it to you. So at Gallatin, it's individualized interdisciplinary study. So there's a really broad range of projects that can be undertaken in the context of our program. And so there's different requirements really depending on what it is that you hope to do. So for our artist scholars, we do require the submission of a portfolio and an artist statement and also an artist CV. So those are things to keep in mind that are specific to one particular kind of project. And really, I think that there's other sort of specific requirements as well. If you're applying for some of our bigger scholarships, we require a writing sample. If you're applying for our graduate assistantships, you have to submit a letter of motivation for those things. So there are a lot of sort of different options, as you would imagine in an individualized program. There's a lot of different ways to sort of pitch yourself at any particular time. And one of the things that I would say when you're applying to our program, we require 2 letters of recommendation. I do highly recommend at least one of those being from an undergraduate professor who can attest to your readiness for graduate study. I recognize a lot of people are coming back to school after many years in a professional trajectory. So sometimes that's not possible. But if it is, I think it does make your application stronger because graduate school requires a lot of academic rigor. So it's nice to have a professor who can attest to your readiness if that's possible. Additionally, because we are a 2-year program and we do require a thesis for completion of the program, really having a clear sense of what you want to do and pitching that in your statement of purpose is a really good way to communicate your readiness. So in our statement of purpose, it's broken into 3 parts. It's what's your concentration going to be? Which fields are you going to be pulling from? What are your qualifications to undertake this program of study at the graduate level? And then we also ask you to submit a plan of study, which a lot of students are kind of a little bit, it's like they're at the end of their statement of purpose and they're just kind of trying to speed up through that last part. If you're intending on applying to Gallatin's graduate program, I would really encourage you to take your time with that last part because developing your own program of study actually requires a lot of forethought and self-motivation. And one way that you can communicate to the admissions committee that you're ready to undertake that kind of responsibility is to really show, even as early on as your application, that you've been thoughtful about what kind of courses you think you would want to take, about which departments you would want to work in, about which faculty members you think might make good advisors for you. So those are all ways to really communicate to the faculty members, I've thought about this, and when I arrive at your school on day 1, I'm going to hit the ground running, and I'm going to really take advantage of the time that I have to do graduate school. I think 2 years sounds like a lot when you're starting a program, and then you'll find that it goes by really quickly. So the more you can do preparing to come to graduate school, the more you can take advantage of the time you have here. So I'll stop there. We talk a lot more about this during our information sessions too. So
Thank you, Jamie. That was super helpful. A lot to unpack, but we'll wait. Who else wants to share?
I'll share. I was excited to jump in because of what Christy said about making sure to follow instructions and do exactly what's written, because that actually, when I was looking at this question of what can you do to stand out, the first thing I thought was you do not want to stand out in a bad way. You definitely, especially for Tish, I would say that probably the most, I mean, all parts of the application process are important, but probably the most heavily weighted aspect is that artistic component. So that portfolio or that writing sample or that audition. And every year we have applicants who don't exactly meet the requirements. They're either too long or too short in the samples that they submit, or their monologues are too long, or they're not from the right time period, or they're basically just not what the faculty are asking for. And I'm not sure if it's because applicants aren't reading closely, or if they just think that they should be the exception and they should be able to bring what they want to the table without considering what the faculty have asked for. And I really encourage you to not do that. I really encourage you to, because it's not going to make you stand out in a good way for being unique. What it's going to say to the faculty is you don't take direction and you don't follow instructions and you might not be a very good student. So I definitely urge you to, of course, like express yourself, show them what you're passionate about, write about exactly what you want to write about, do what you want to do, but within the limits that have been set, because it's very important to stay within those limits and show the faculty that you can do what they're going to ask of you.
Yeah, I always recommend to students, put yourself in the shoes of those on the committee. There are people who will be reviewing those applications and the letters and the statement, everything, every single component of your application. And so if you have a guideline of 4 pages and that committee is receiving 10 pages, think about how, what that's saying to them. So really good points by some of my colleagues here, Laura and Jamie. So at Silver, since we're a social work professional institution, I mentioned that we review applications holistically, so we don't have those minimums. I saw some questions in the Q&A about, GPAs. We don't necessarily have minimums, but however, we are, a professional institution. So a lot of times we get questions from students, do I need to have a social work background? How can if I don't have a social work background, what can I do to kind of substitute that? So essentially, what we're looking for is someone who has the capacity to, one, conceptualize and make judgments in general. We're looking for someone with knowledge of and commitment to social work, whether or not you've had the background in social work, but somebody who can kind of vocalize their commitment to the profession or desire to go into the profession, and just who has a personal regard for others in general. We're looking for people who, of course, have respect for and commitment to diversity and social justice. So touching on any of that or highlighting or emphasizing any of that in your application, whether it be in the resume, the statement of purpose, is going to be important. It's going to look really well for any committee or anyone who's reviewing your application. But I think that it just demonstrates your ability to be a social worker. We're really just looking for an all-around capacity for self-awareness and personal growth. So a lot of those statement of purpose questions are very personal, very intimate, and really try to pull out some of that information. I love that, with our application, there's no guesswork. We're asking you the questions that we want the answers to, and there's no tricks, right? So if you answer the questions, you're really giving us that information already. But specifically for those folks who don't have a BSW or maybe are switching careers, we get a lot of career changers as well. I think that showing a readiness for social work education is important. So you could do that by some type of volunteer experience or related work experience, or even just community activities and participation in organizations that kind of hold the same values as social work. And you can start doing that as early as the application stage and kind of speak to what those experiences have given you. So yeah, that's kind of what we're looking for in that application. While we do have students who come with a BSW or come from a social work background, a large majority of our students have varying backgrounds and varying academic experiences. So our students are coming from all over. What they have in common is that they're able to demonstrate, their commitment to social work and their desire to go into the field and help others.
Thanks, Sam. That's super helpful. Tom, do you want to weigh in? And then I've got a few follow-up questions.
Sure. I don't have the best internet connection. My apologies. Kind of to reiterate, show us that you've done your research, you understand the program of study, you're ready for a rigorous academic program, you've looked at the curriculum, you've looked at the faculty, you've attended these sessions. Within your statement of purpose, we like to see who you are today and why you're ready for this. It's not as important who you were 10 years ago. So those that are so fixated on maybe a less than stellar GPA, if you've been out for a while, that's not as important. It's what steps have you taken that have shown your interest, enthusiasm, and relatability to the program of study you want to undertake. Back to you, Christy.
Thanks, Sam. I think that's really great insight and something that is nice to hear sometimes, because a lot of times we'll talk to students who have been out of school for a little bit. So I appreciate you commenting on the fact that we are looking at, who you are today. And Sam, to your point, utilizing volunteer opportunities as a way to show your interest. I think, again, going back to the research piece, the more you know about the program, the more you can detail in your personal statement the why. Because again, I think Sam, you said this as well, like thinking about who's reviewing these applications, a lot of times they're faculty members who are going to be teaching you, and they want to hear from students who are actively engaged and interested in that program in particular, because that makes the classroom dynamic a lot more engaging. So I think those are really helpful things to keep in mind. There was a question in the chat about a writing sample. So I wanted to ask a little bit about your opinions on those. So if a program asks for a writing sample in addition to a personal statement, should it relate to your area of study? In this case, this person is finishing undergrad. So would a piece that they wrote for their undergraduate class suffice, or does it need to be directly related to the program of study? So I don't know if any of you take writing samples, or if anyone wants to weigh in on this one.
We take writing samples, especially for students who are applying for the Dean's Graduate Scholarships at Gallatin, which are some of our larger awards. And I would say it's great if there's some sort of way to bridge what you've worked on in the past to what you're trying to do. But really, what our committee wants to see is that you are thinking analytically, that you're able to write and express yourself at a level that communicates readiness for graduate level work. So whether or not we can see a direct correlation between what you did in undergrad and what you're proposing to do in the master's program is not as important in our mind as, is this person a good communicator? Are they able to kind of synthesize and summarize in ways that will serve them in terms of how they're researching and writing in our program? And can those kinds of skills transfer to the kind of work that they want to do while they're at NYU Gallatin? So some relationship is great, but if it's not a perfect direct tie to what you want to do in graduate studies, it's not a problem at Gallatin.
Great. I think that's helpful. Submit your strongest work if it's not directly related. Sam, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'm not sure if any of the other schools here accept writing samples or require them. We don't either at Silver, but historically at institutions where that have accepted writing samples, and for the folks who may be wondering, the expectation is not that you are creating a new writing sample. It's not that you're typing a research paper specifically for that institution. Something that you've already done, one that's a lot of time on the student's end, and I don't think anyone should have to put in that much work for an application. So something that you've already done, and like Jamie mentioned, if there's a tie, then that's awesome. But for the most part, writing samples are to demonstrate your ability to write at a graduate school level. And so if you have something that you've already worked on that can demonstrate that, that typically suffices for most programs.
Great.
And I'd say at Steinhardt, some of our programs will require a writing sample, some it's optional. For all of our applicants, there's what we call an additional upload section where you're welcome to put in a writing sample. At the doctoral level, for PhD programs, EDDs, which we offer, it is helpful if your writing sample is related to the field of study. You're going to be doing a lot of writing in all graduate programs, but in particular in a doctoral program. So you'll see that might be more of a requirement. These tend to be academic, might be part of a thesis or research paper that you individually worked on, but it varies from program to program. And really in our how to apply guideline for every program, it tells you if the writing sample is required or not. Awesome. Thank you all. That's really helpful. Tom, you mentioned a supplemental section, and so I wanted to transition a little bit. There was a question about, is a 3.0 GPA now negotiable? I know a lot of programs have recommended, but tend to be flexible on that with a holistic review. So I wanted to ask you all to talk a little bit about the holistic review process, but more particularly, let's say someone had a tough semester. They started out pre-med and they decided they wanted to go into social work, and things in that first semester just didn't work out. What's the best way to talk about that? I know a lot of times, reviewers will see that, but if there is a supplemental section, is that something that applicants should upload a statement that says, this was what was going on in my life during that time, or this is why you might see a dip in my transcript, or something to talk a little bit about their GPA or test scores if that's an issue. So I'm curious if you can share some light or insight or advice on how to tackle those challenges.
I would say for Tish, going along with the holistic review, and as I mentioned earlier, that artistic component is definitely the most heavily weighted. And then that being said, the faculty are going to be reviewing your transcript and taking a look to make sure that the courses you took in undergrad that are going to be similar to the courses they're going to have you take in grad school, they want to make sure you have good grades in those. So if you're coming for acting and you have bad grades in all of your acting classes, they're going to wonder what's going on there. But if you're coming for acting and you have a bad grade in your physics class, it's not really going to be an issue. It's not going to give them pause in the admissions review process. But if you are worried about it, in the Tish application, we don't really have a supplemental section, but I encourage applicants, if you are worried that that might have a negative impact on your application, you could try to incorporate it into your personal statement and just bring up what was going on, why you struggled with certain classes or during a certain semester, if you feel like it's appropriate to incorporate that into your personal statement and talk about why that was an issue as part of your undergrad experience, but you're confident that it won't be as part of your grad school experience.
Yeah, I agree. On the silver application specifically. What'd you say, Tom?
My apologies. Go ahead.
Did you want to hop in?
After you. My apologies.
That's okay. Yeah, so on the silver application, we do allow a section in the personal statement to talk about anything that you'd like to tell us, whether that be addressing a dip in your academic performance or talking about something that wouldn't be seen by us on a first look or in a review process. So if there's anything that isn't touched on in your resume that we can't see in your statement of purpose or your personal statement, or isn't touched on by your letters of recommendation, it's always helpful to discuss it if you feel like it will best represent you or help represent who you are better. In addition to that, at Silver, we also offer non-degree courses or non-matriculated courses. We also have an exploratory program for students who are going into social work. And I always suggest this program for those who, one, maybe don't have that social work background, or maybe didn't perform as well in undergrad and want to highlight their ability to perform well at a graduate school level. It's always helpful to look into some of those non-degree programs or on-ramp, we call it on-ramp, those exploratory options. To us, it signifies not only that you're dedicated and that you're interested in social work, but that you can also complete courses at the rigor that we have here at Silver. And so I always recommend those for students, regardless of which program which school that you're applying to. If you're concerned about, not being able to highlight or emphasize your readiness for grad school work, that looking into those non-degree options is always helpful, especially if they offer a component that can count towards your degree if you later pursue a degree at the institution.
Again, my apologies. I keep freezing a little bit. I'm working remotely, but our additional upload section, again, it's optional. And we do say it's a holistic review. All parts of your application are going to be looked at before a decision is made. And I would stress highlighting your strengths and downplaying your weaknesses. So there's really no need to put in a huge, long statement about why you got that D in chemistry, but you're going to be doing a music business program. That's not of importance to us. If you feel there may have been a leave of absence that you need to explain, that might be more something that would be suitable in the additional upload section. And I'm passing it back to the panel or Christy. Thanks.
I'll just jump in real quick also I think everything that everybody has said is so useful, and there's a lot of wisdom in what my colleagues are saying. I also just want to kind of reassure everyone, because graduate school is not undergrad. And we recognize that people are coming into programs at really different moments in their life than undergraduate admissions processes. And so we evolve a lot as humans, and there's a way in which, admissions committees are aware of the fact that there's a lot of ups and downs and ebb and flow in a person's life. So also, just to kind of circle back to what Tom was saying, I think there's a way in which, you can feel a lot of regret and remorse about a particular semester in your life, but the committee recognizes that that's true for everybody. right? So we've all had rough times, so it's okay. That doesn't mean you're not ready for graduate study. But it can be helpful to kind of give a little context and then move on. But, it's just something to keep in mind that graduate school is a different landscape of collegiality than undergrad is. And people are coming back to school at all different moments in their life. So you won't be alone as someone who's had blips on their radar.
Absolutely. Thank you all. That was really helpful insight and a lot of good reminders as well. I've got a quick question that I want to address more broadly for international students. So if you would all quickly share your school's general policy on 3-year degrees and how you go about applying if you are coming from a country in which 3-year degrees are typical. And then if you accept at-home TOEFL exams, I know a lot of these requirements are listed on websites, so we are also happy to share those out if that's easier. But particularly interested to hear advice or insight for international students around 3-year degrees.
So I just shared in the chat, it depends which country. There are some countries where a 3-year degree is the equivalent of a US bachelor's degree, and there are some countries where it is not. So I just shared the link in the chat. For anybody interested in applying for Tish, you can check that out for your country and see what the requirements are to make sure you have US bachelor's equivalency.
Thanks, Laura, because I think that is the same across the board for most graduate schools. As long as that international degree is comparable to or equivalent to 120, sorry, there's a printer going off in the background if you can hear that. As long as that international degree is equivalent to the 120 US bachelor's degree, regardless of the duration of study, that is typically accepted. For silver, we do require a course-by-course evaluation course evaluation through either WES or ECE, and they typically tell us what the equivalency of your degree, what that equivalency is. And if you've gone through that process, that can also be used for most graduate schools as well. We also do accept the IBT and the at-home TOEFL, as well as Duolingo and IELTS.
I'm going to put in the chat our requirements for our international applicants. And one thing to point out, which I'm surprised we get a lot of questions, is people are wondering if they're an international applicant or not. We consider it's based on your citizenship. So if you're a US citizen, even though all of your life you've lived in Sweden, due to the fact that you have that US citizenship, you are what we call a US applicant. It's not based on where you live. Just like if you are from Brazil, but you've lived your entire life in the US, you're and have not become a permanent resident for some reason, you would still be considered an international applicant. But we do have in-depth instructions that I'm posting, and a lot of people reach out to the Office of Graduate Admissions. My quick advice is international applicants are going to need more time to get their application together. If you need an English language proficiency exam or you need a credential evaluation, really, if you're thinking about fall studies of 2024, you should start preparing now. And also for programs that might require a GRE, you're going to want to do that now. I'm passing it back to the panel.
Thanks, Tom. That's really helpful insight and something I don't actually think about a lot about the point about citizenship. So thank you for sharing that. Jamie, did you have something to add? I saw that you unmuted.
Yeah, I was just going to basically say I could copy and paste Sam's whole. It's not a dialogue, but what Sam said, it's the same for Gallatin. And I did actually copy and paste our link. But we also require the ECE and the WES for international students who are coming to our program, and we have general guidelines for minimum scores on all of the various English language proficiency tests. That's another instance of where you feel like if your score doesn't reflect your ability, one, I would suggest retaking it. But if there's something you need to kind of give more context for, that would be important, because actually English language proficiency is a really big component pointing toward candidate success at our school. There's a lot of reading and writing in our program. So it's important that the committee can assess whether or not you're ready to do that in the English language.
Excellent. Thank you all for that insight. And for everything you shared about the application process. Before I change gears a little bit and wrap up with our last two questions, I did want to remind everybody on the call that I recognize that NYU is a large place, and that's why we're here doing this, and that there are representatives from all the schools who are available to help point you in the right direction. A lot of this information is available online, but sometimes it's hard to find, or you're not exactly sure where to start. So reminder that our office here at Central Grad Admissions, that's what we're here for, is to help connect you directly to the schools with some of that information. So do not fear if it feels a little bit overwhelming. There's information out there. And the more information you can collect now during this phase, the better off you'll be when you start really diving into your application process. So with that, I'm going to shift gears a little bit, just talking about financing, recognizing that graduate school is a large financial commitment and endeavor. And so I wanted you to all share either things that applicants can start thinking about how to pay for college, or things to consider when they're thinking about funding their education, and or any information you want to share about scholarships that happen at the school level. If there are separate application processes, if all applicants are reviewed automatically, what that scholarship process looks like on your end. So either general advice or specific things scholarship wise at the school. Jamie, I'll have you kick it off on this one, if you don't mind.
Sure. At Gallatin, we do offer 4 Dean's Graduate Scholarships every fall to full-time study applicants. And those are our largest sort of merit-based awards. And there's more information about that on our website. To apply for those, you have to submit a writing sample, but otherwise it's just the same application, and there will be a question on the application regarding that. We also every fall offer between 2 and 3 graduate assistantships, and those are those cover tuition and include a stipend and require a commitment of 20 hours a week, and they're actually administrative jobs. And so if you're interested in one of those assistantships, when you apply, you'll be asked to also upload a letter of motivation and a professional CV, which might be very different from the CV that you include for your application, because it should speak to your ability to do the job, not to your academic qualifications to get into the program. Because the graduate assistantships, we're really looking for people, yes, who have academic promise, because those are the people we want in our program, but we also need people who can do the job. So that's also important. And you will also be asked to list 3 professional references, and those will be different than your academic references. Maybe they won't be for you, but you should be thinking about them as different kinds of recommendations. Also, for anyone who's interested, those are available to both domestic and international students, all of those opportunities. But for domestic students, you must submit a FAFSA in order to qualify for any of these awards and opportunities. Also, anyone who's interested in receiving any kind of financial awards or scholarships from us should submit their application by our financial aid priority deadline, which is January 15th. The rest of our application cycle stays open until March 15th, but what we will have in the scholarship and award pot will be significantly reduced after that first financial aid priority deadline. So those are some of the ways that, specific to Gallatin, you can sort of start to think about how to mobilize particular kinds of opportunities. I would also say that NYU does have a lot of resources for people to educate themselves about how to make the choice about financial readiness for graduate study. They have a tool that's open to both current students and prospective students called Grad, which has access to all kinds of financial planning tools and also scholarship opportunities that are for smaller grants and awards that you might not be able to just find on Google by yourself. So there are a lot of institutional supports for you, even at a prospective level at NYU. So I'll stop there.
Thanks, Jamie. That was really helpful. And I just dropped the link in for iGrad because I think that is a really good resource. And you made a great point about FAFSA, so a reminder for domestic students. You can submit your FAFSA application even before you submit your actual application and definitely before you hear back. So that's just one thing you could do now to help ease the process later. And there was a question about in-state versus out-of-state tuition. I know that's awful confusing about New York University, but NYU is a private institution. And so all students pay essentially the same tuition. There is no difference for in-state or out-of-state tuition, and nor is there for out of domestic or international students. The tuition rates for the particular school or program remain the same. So thank you for that question in the chat. Anyone else want to weigh in on scholarships at your schools?
I'm more than willing to. I would say start looking now. Look at our scholarship page for NYU Steinhardt. Look for outside scholarships. Really, it's not uncommon that sometimes scholarships, you have to apply a year in advance. Our international students, many of them might be a Fulbright scholar or getting a government scholarship that requires well in advance preparation and filling out a separate application. For NYU Steinhardt, we do require for our domestic students and green card holders they fill out the FAFSA form to be considered for our school-based scholarships. But then in addition, all students can apply for specialty scholarships, which are all listed in our Paying for Your Education section. I think I'll drop that in as well. But no student is getting a full ride for absolutely everything. Our scholarships for master's students are partial. You're going to want to take into consideration what type of loans am I willing to take on? What type of personal savings do I have? Then looking for outside scholarships, and then scholarships that are offered through NYU Steinhardt. Some scholarships are actually maybe through the music department, a talent scholarship, art department, and we have no control in graduate admissions over who's getting those. It's made by faculty committees. Again, I gave you a mishmash of information there, but we say do not wait until you're admitted to apply for financial aid for NYU Steinhardt. Our main deadline for most of our programs is February 1st, and March 1st is the main deadline to apply for financial aid and scholarships. So you don't wait until you're admitted to apply.
Yeah, I echo that. Starting early is my number one piece of advice, whether it be speaking with the financial aid counselor, discussing your specific situations. Like I mentioned in the beginning, deciding to attend grad school is an intimate process, right? So not only are you reflecting on your goals, you're also reflecting on the financial undertaking that comes along with attending graduate school. So while you're researching graduate schools, thinking about the cost of attendance, not just the tuition sticker price, but also the cost of living in those areas, the housing, relocation, transportation, all of those things. I'm sure many of us will also say here if you're eligible to apply for federal aid. A large majority of our silver students do complete the FAFSA and are receiving some type of federal aid. We also do have scholarships at silver. A large majority of our students receive some type of aid. Like Tom mentioned, not a lot of our students are receiving full tuition scholarships. And so that's why it's going to be important to begin budgeting, start looking at federal aid and other loan options, maybe even work study if that's possible. Another component of that is to consider employment. A lot of our students work some type of part-time job, again, whether it be work study or working on or around campus. That's also going to be another huge opportunity to supplement the cost of attending any graduate school.
Thank you all so much. I think that was really valuable insight. And I know we're coming up on time. So I want to thank you all for joining us. This was really valuable information. If you're willing to drop in the chat either your email address or your general school email address, for people who, if they want to follow up with any additional questions, they may be able to do that. a big thank you to our team on the back end, answering almost 50 questions throughout the session. We'll hang on the line for just a few more minutes after and try to get to those last minute questions. But again, feel free to reach out to our office. You'll get a follow-up email from us, and then you can respond directly to that, and a member from our team can connect you to the school or attempt to answer the question directly. And thank you all for joining us. And with that, I'd like in the final minute, if we could just give one last piece of advice. So we'll do a quick round robin. Just any closing thoughts as people are thinking about starting their application to NYU. Laura, I'll start with you, and then we'll go Sam, Tom, and Jamie.
Sure. This is potentially a minor thing, but in addition to the, consider what you want and talk to loved ones and things like that, a piece of advice I really want to give folks is maybe identify your recommenders as one of the first things you do and add them to your application. Because for a lot of programs, your recommendations do need to be submitted by the application deadline. And that's the one part of the application outside of your control is when your recommenders will submit them. So I would say pretty much as soon as you start your application, add them so that email invitation link gets sent out to your recommenders and they have the entire application period to getting around to submitting it. Whereas if you only add your recommender information the day before the deadline, that doesn't give them a lot of time, and it could end up putting your application in purgatory and holding off on it getting reviewed by the admissions committee, which you don't want.
That's really, really clutch. I'm glad we got that in. Thank you, Laura. Sam, what about you?
Yeah, I agree with Laura. A lot of graduate school deadlines are received by deadlines, so that means all application materials should be received by those deadlines. That's not the case for all of them, but a lot of them, that's essentially what the deadlines are hinting toward. My piece of advice is to, I guess, along the lines of those application materials, is to tailor your application materials to the schools that you're applying to. If you're applying to 5 social work schools, you're going to want to make sure that you're really addressing your fit for those schools. And that involves doing some research on those individual schools and really highlighting that research that you've done. If there's a specific faculty member whose research aligns with kind of your interests, you're going to want to highlight that. If there's something in particular about, Silver or any institution, you're going to want to customize and personalize those statements of purpose. Or I saw a question about if statement of purpose and personal statement are the same thing. So both of those things are the same. And so you're really going to want to personalize those. You'd be surprised how many, applications we get of statement of purpose or letters addressed to different institutions. And so you're going to want to make sure that you're targeting, the school that you're meaning to apply to. So.
I can attest to the validity of what both Sam and Laura have said, and especially for a program like an individualized interdisciplinary program. If it's not clear to us that you know what you want to do when you get here, we actually don't want to take you because we don't want to waste your time. Fit is really important for graduate school programs. So making it clear that you are a good fit for the program and the program is a good fit for you is really important. And I will also say, I think Laura brings up a good point. All of the application materials are under your control except your letters of reference. One way to improve outcomes for your application is to give your recommenders as much context and background as possible as to why the programs you're applying to make sense for you, what you've done that makes you a competitive candidate for those programs. So I've written a lot of letters of recommendation as a faculty member. And the more my students give me in terms of helping me understand why I'm writing this letter for them, the better their letter is. So it's out of your control, but you can certainly make a lot of impact in the way that you prepare your recommenders to write your letters of reference. Otherwise, they're just going on, maybe they haven't had you in class for 5 years, and they remember kind of vaguely that you did a good paper. It's going to be a nice letter, but it's not going to be stellar.
Thanks, Jamie. That's really helpful. Tom, any parting words in the last 30 seconds? So thanks everybody for hanging on with us.
Sure. One thing that I tell people is think of yourself like you're applying for the job of graduate student, that you want the job. You want to show the future school employer that you're qualified. make us believe that this is NYU and the program at Steinhardt is your number one choice, even though we know you're probably applying to more than one university. Your enthusiasm, your knowledge of research that you've done on our particular program, it's going to stand out. And the whole purpose of that application is either for faculty to see they feel you're qualified, or for you to be granted an interview. Again, I'm going over time, but yeah, you're applying for the job of graduate student.
I think that is a great tip to end on. Thank you again to our panelists. I feel inspired and definitely much more knowledgeable about the process. So I hope all of our participants do as well. Thank you again for joining, for staying with us as we went a little bit over. Again, you'll get an email, so feel free to follow up with any additional questions. Thanks all, and have a good rest of your day or morning or evening. Have a good night.
Bye, everybody.